It's a guy, a car, and a podcast.
It's a guy, a car, and a podcast.
It's a guy, a car, and a podcast.
It's a guy, a car, and a podcast. Buckle up.
As far as podcast goes, I feel like as an audience member, that gets annoying listening to people
How long have you been
trying.
doing a podcast? Or is this a new thing?
I mean, it's relatively new, but I started it a year ago, last January, with a friend of mine, Chelsea Reeder. We would get together. I'd pick her up on Sundays, usually like Sunday evening, and we'd go for like an hour-long drive, and we'd talk, and then I'd drop her off, and that was the whole podcast. And it was called A Girl, a Guy, in a Car. And we did that for like 18, 19 episodes. And then she was just like, I love you, but this isn't my thing. I don't want to keep doing this. So she bailed. We did kind of a goodbye episode. And then I was just like, man, I mean, I'm not done. And I know she was like, you should keep going. You clearly have things you
So
want
what
to
was
say.
the topic of it? Like, what was the focal
I know some podcasts have like topics and stuff. I don't. Some of my favorite podcasts
So
are like,
for her to up and leave, it wasn't like...
it was because we were talking about. Well, it might have been because we got talking about dating a lot, and I tell stories like
Did
think it was like
you
Matt-
date this girl, or was this...
No,
so how often
wanted
was
to
this? Oh, okay.
desperately. Like she's gorgeous, just funny, smart. Like she's perfect, and if she gave me a chance there, yeah, I would totally, want to make her my wife. But she's just not into me, and I've kind of had to accept
Podcast fell
that.
apart.
Yeah, the podcast wasn't aimed at that. Like I've known this girl since I was 23 or 4. We met in a singles ward 15 years ago, and we just stayed loosely friends because I left the church, and so I got divorced and left the church like at the same time, so I just lost a ton of friends during that time. So she stayed in contact with me during that time. So when I came back to the church, she and I rejoiced over that. The fact that the podcast happened was kind of weird because I'd gotten tickets. No, I think I heard that there was a mid-singles group that had rented out a movie theater for one of the newer Star Wars movies. And I was like, well, I'm doing that. So I bought 2 tickets, and I think I waited till the last minute. I'm like, who am I going to take? And I thought Chelsea, and she's a very busy person. Like, she keeps her life very busy and active and stuff. And so I'm like, she's not going to have time. And I just kind of texted her, and I'm like, hey, I got this thing. You want to do it? And she's like, yeah. And just shocked me. So we went to this movie together.
It was
And
Star Wars, wasn't it? She
yeah,
had
it was.
space for the Star Wars movie.
I don't think
No,
so.
just kidding. It was you. I'm sure it was you.
No, it wasn't that either. I mean, it was me in the sense that she enjoys spending time with me. Like we have a good rapport. But we just got like deep talking like before the movie came on, to the point that I'm kind of a loud guy, and I'm not really afraid to say things that are maybe like intimate or personal. Loud, so that other people might overhear our conversation. And she was just progressively like sinking down in her seat and like, maybe we should talk about this part later. And I was like, oh, okay. So we continued hanging out that night, and basically the night ended with me saying to her, listen, I think you need more friends. I think your life is a little too compartmentalized. Basically all the complaining that she does is to like her mom or somebody in her family, and she has a few friends that she'll go on hikes with and stuff like that, but other than that, like, her life is just kind of a little more compact. And I was like, you need to like stretch yourself a bit. And I was like, I would love to be a part of that process, for you to like just someone else for you to hang out with, someone else for you to talk to, bounce your ideas off of, get different feedback and stuff. And so like I didn't think of anything of it because I knew she didn't like me like that, and for some weird reason, I think that all women have to like me like that to let me into their world. If that, like, to invite me into their world. Like, there's got to be some kind of primal attraction, or there's no point. And so, I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think she was going to call me. And a week later, she was like, hey, friend. Hey, new friend. How you doing? What's going on? I was
Awesome.
So we went out to dinner, and we just, like, went out. We were at dinner for, like, an hour or two, went on, like, a drive, went back to her house, talked for, like, 4 hours, had a great, I think we got back in, had, like, a great time. And then...
Daisy, come on. Go lay down. You're not going to put this in, are you?
But I want to be in the movie.
Oh,
Please?
get out of here.
Can I be in the movie? Why not? There's dogs in movies. So, like, kind of joking, I guess I brought it up that I was just like, we should do a podcast. Like, this is fun talking to you, and I think other people would enjoy this. And she was like, okay. And I took her very serious. And I don't know, probably like a week later or something like that, I texted her and I was like, so, I was thinking maybe Sunday. Does that seem like a good day for you to do the podcast? And I'll come pick you up and we'll go for a drive because we talked about the format of it. We just drive around. And she was like, oh, you were serious? And then we had one of those conversations. I'm like, yeah, I am. She's like, all right, let's give it a try. And then, the first episode's adorable. Like, if you listen to it, it's just really... both of us like self-conscious and we just don't have any idea what it is, but we loosen up and talk like we talk and it's a fun time. And then that just turned into us kind of telling stories about our life. And I told her this like horrible story about a Match.com date I went on that was just bad news. And the podcast got to a point where I was getting very personal because the podcasts I listen to, the people are pretty brave and pretty personal about things. So I like to be that way in my show. And I think she maybe got to the point where she was just like, I don't know that I want my stuff out there in this way. Like, this is... She never said that. She just said, this is my thing. But, like, for example, she had a birthday party. Her mom threw a birthday party, and, like, her friends were there, and I was there, not because I'm in her friend group, but because she and I did a podcast together, so... It was kind of odd being in this circle of people who know each other really well and hang out all the time, and then dude that people are like, oh, that's the guy who was a podcast
Guy.
And we end up around like a fire pit at the end of the night, and I'm sitting next to one of her female friends, like this gorgeous blonde. I'm just talking to her, just being loose, just not thinking I have a chance, so I'm not tense. I'm just like, whatever. And we just start connecting to the point that like, at this one, I hope she's still listening because she's not happy with me about the fact that I've talked about her on the podcast. But, like, she tears up a few times because of just a level of feeling understood happens.
Right.
And it's beautiful. I'm just like, I don't want to be weird or anything, but if you want to, like, go out sometime, go hang out, go talk. And she's like, totally. And she gave me her number, and I'm just leaving that party like, I just like got the number of like the hottest girl at that party. That's insane. And so I text her. So that was like, I think it was a Saturday night. And then Chelsea and I go out and do the podcast the next night. And that's all I'm talking about. I'm just like...
Is her friend?
Yeah. I'm like, this happened. And I tell the whole story and all that, what have you. And, post a podcast. And then I let a few days go by because I'm trying to play the game of don't jump all over, her with messages or phone calls. And so I text her, and I'm like, hey, we should go out. And she's like, yeah, cool. And then a few days later, I'm like, so maybe Friday? And she's like, maybe. And then at some point, I was getting more concrete with the plans to the point that essentially she sent me a message where she was just like, listen, I listened to the podcast. I'm way not okay with, being talked about in public. And, I don't want to see you, so sorry, have a nice life.
Yay.
It was weird. And it was weird for me because it was like, this podcast thing, like, I might look like I know what I'm doing. It's so uncomfortable for me. Like, I acknowledge that I'm nobody. I'm not a person of influence. I'm not famous. I'm just a guy. The show, since Chelsea's gone, is literally called A Guy, a Car, and a Podcast. Because it's just me. And that makes me really like self-conscious about the whole thing. So it was a really weird moment where I was just like, you may want to prepare yourself for this to happen over and over again, because you know you're not going to stop the podcast, because this has become really cathartic for you to like talk out your feelings with people and stuff. But there's going to be people, women specifically, that aren't going to be comfortable with that, and you're just going to like lose opportunities over it. So it was a weird one of those like just jerking in traffic wake up calls.
Like you said, you're a very, very open person, and if somebody's not going to be comfortable with it, then they're not going to be comfortable with it, whether it's in a podcast scenario or sitting in a movie theater or in real life. So if somebody's comfortable with you talking about them on the podcast, then you're golden. I mean,
what you're saying is
they're
true.
Accepting a part of you that
but
is
what
not gonna
irks me
change.
about that is that people are almost always comfortable with me one-on-one. But the minute that it stands a chance of being public, and it's not that I'm judging the self-conscious, like, knee-jerk reaction of it, they just aren't okay with that. But I'm sitting there thinking, there's so much value to the way that you and I just connected in that movie theater or over that dinner or just sitting on a park bench talking. And it's the kind of value that can lift people. We just had a conversation that edified us. We both left it feeling a little better, a little more, educated, understood. And that's a good thing to share. But yes, to share that means you're putting yourself out there and you're opening yourself up for possible criticism. That's true. The beautiful thing about this podcast is nobody really listens to it at this point. So I haven't faced any major criticism. Nobody's really come down on me. And frankly, because of where I come from, I was raised in the church, went on a mission, came home, got married, got sealed to a woman. 2.5 years later, that fell apart hard. We got divorced, she left, I left the church. 7 some odd years of not being part of the church and rock bands and just all sorts of debauchery. And then, the experience, and then I rejoined myself with the church. I am both of those people. It's like there's this guy. When you look at him, I've had people make fun of me because I've been posting little videos of my trip, me doing this. And a good friend of mine back home was just like, would you shave your face? You're going back to your mission. What's wrong with you? And with me, it's like, first of all, this happens to be just where I'm at right now. Right now, this is kind of how I'm feeling about life. So I've taken time to build this person. Second of all, I think on an artistic level, the story of going back to my mission is more compelling if it's told by the most unlikely character. This guy. Like this thing. So it's intentional that I'm taking a really unkempt, just kind of rock and roll version of me back to holy and spiritual places to try to like relive something and reconnect to it and tell my story. And so like, part of where I don't blame the podcast anymore is I'm just like, the truth is what a woman is going to face with me as a decision is the fact that I am a skewed human. Like there are 2 very distinct men that live inside of this shell. There's the one that you got to know. There's a clean cut, someone who seeks to be good and to project something, I guess, righteous. I don't know that I like that word because it insinuates things that I don't mean by that, but just wholesome. Kind of, he really enjoys being wholesome. And then there's this guy who sees beauty in the darkness and knows how to value things that other people think are disgusting. And my point in saying that is the podcast, if you listen to it, some weeks I'm talking to somebody that comes from one side of my life, and we have a good, conversation about the holiness of life or whatever. And on the other side, the next podcast is listed as explicit because I'm talking to somebody from a different part of my life. And I'll use language and stuff that connects to that. Partly because I just want that person to be comfortable. So I don't want to sit there and say frickin' gosh darn and stuff when the truth is there's a person inside of me that values the power of cursing. Like I connect to it in a very specific way. So I'm just not afraid to be that guy on the podcast too. And so it's a weird time in my life where what I'm trying to do, because basically I think I was talking to Golightly about this, or I don't know, but I lived the first 20 years of my life like this guy, and that turned out the way that it did. And then I lived the next 7 years of my life like this guy, really committed to, just the darkness. And that lent itself to like a rock bottom. That was kind of rough. And so now I'm in this place where I'm like, if both guys are in there, why can't I figure out a way to be both guys? And so I'm trying to figure out how to like build this, like fully construct this guy and feel comfortable in church meetings, in temple attendance, in being on a date with a very, Mormon girl with good standards and stuff like that, feeling like I deserve to be in those places. And then, in a year or two, when I get tired of this, because long hair is a lot of work, all right, I can, trim it all up and I can get all clean cut and I can be on stage, using language that's appropriate to what's happening there and playing aggressive rock songs. I've written songs that talk about really hard feelings and talk about them hardly, so I can be that guy too, and I can be all clean cut and stuff, but I can be in a place that everybody else is all tattooed up and has long hair and smoking and drinking and stuff. Like both guys reside in me, so I'm on this weird mission to figure out like, how can I just stop trying to be one or the other and thinking that guy's going to make me happy and just realize that happiness is in the coexistence of those two guys. They're both part of me. If that makes any sense. It might not. It's bananas.
It makes sense, but I think as well, like, I see a lot of insecurity struggling in that. Like, sorry, I'm going all
it's good. I need this. I need it.
You want to be accepted being the opposite in one scenario, mm-hmm. and then be accepted being the opposite in the opposite scenario. Mm-hmm. Like,
it's like a rebellious move in the weirdest way, where it's like I can prove to them, and I can prove to them, and
But I don't know. In my perspective, in the different scenarios, and I've walked with different people, figuratively before, and mm-hmm. I am not comfortable in all of the scenarios, but I think where you're really able to win is where you are able to, like, you have defined yourself so clearly, and really in an ideal situation, God would be with you and helping you define that. Like, mm-hmm. you're going to Him and saying, what do you want me to be? How do I need to change? What do I need to let go of? And then no matter what scenario you're in, you're able to comfortably be that. I mean, because think about Jesus. The people that He walked with were the publicans and sinners, and the people that were uber righteous were condemning Him for that and saying, why would you be with these kind of people?
Yeah.
And He was still, He was so sure of who He was and what His mission was that it didn't matter where He was. He didn't have to change who He was no matter where He went. So, I don't know.
Which is, I think I spend a lot of time wondering about that. I think in the midst of my journey to figure this out, I try to figure out what little we know about Jesus from just the words that are, printed in Scripture. And I try to see the possibilities of, based on what He accomplished and what people seem to think about Him, His followers and things, and the way they would talk about Him. I tried to see different versions of Him, where I was like, okay, could He be... Because you're right, like, the people that He chose to be around were the rejects. And some of His best friends were like these arrogant, like James and John, were
You're talking about like campaigning as to who gets to be
Yeah.
next to him? Yeah.
And like there was this, and I think that endeared him to them. It's almost like this. If you ever seen the movie Tombstone, probably the most brilliant film about what happened, the Wyatt Earp thing, the OK Corral, and a whole bunch of people died. It's great. Kurt Russell's in it. It's fantastic. It's rated R, but only because there's violence and some well-placed curse words. Anyway, Doc Holliday is one of the characters in that, and arguably no one liked Doc Holliday. He just had an attitude, and he was a violent drunk, and just, he stole from people and killed people. Like, he was just kind of a mess of a guy. But Wyatt Earp loved him, and there's this one scene in the movie where they get to Tombstone and they're kind of setting up shop, and Doc's there, and he comes over and he starts talking to him and stuff. And I think Doc bombs off, and Wyatt's brother is standing next to him, and he's just like, something along the lines like, what do you see in that, ingrate or whatever he called him? And Wyatt was just like, I don't know, he makes me laugh. And there's something so, like, endearing to me about the fact that, and Wyatt and Doc had, like, a long friendship. Like, Doc went with Wyatt on this rampage where he just went after the Cowboys and decided, I'm done with this. Like, after his brother got killed by him, like, he was just done with it. And he went on a rampage and killed a bunch of people, but to put an end to, like, basically the bandits of their day. And Doc went with him on that and like, just killed a whole bunch of people. But it's the fact that, like, in the midst of all of Doc's flaws, there was arguably like a really, the kind of guy that cares about people that are worth caring about, which is why he was Wyatt Earp's friend. And like, just the scene when Doc's on his deathbed and Wyatt comes to visit him is like ugly cry. Like, Doc is just like, he's like, Doc's like an invalid. Like, he's in bed, he's a mess. He just can't move anything. And Wyatt's like playing poker with him, doing everything. Like, he deals the cards, and then he like picks up like Doc's cards, and he like takes a few, and like Doc's just basically sitting there. And Doc like has a tear running down his cheek, and he's like, Wyatt, you arrogant bastard, like, why can't you just go away, leave me alone? And Wyatt's just like, oh, you won again, Doc. Like, he's just not even, like, listening to him. And there's this one point where Doc just basically says, Wyatt, if you ever loved me, I just need you to leave. And Wyatt gives him this book. And he said, it's a great performance. Like, Kurt Russell crushes it. He turns around before he leaves, and he says, thanks for always being there, Doc. And then he just walks off. And Doc, like, picks up the book, and it says, the title of the book is My Friend Doc Holliday by Wyatt Earp. And he just, like, sheds a few tears and then dies. Like, just passed away. It's so dramatic. But the point is, like, Doc Holliday, like, didn't have any friends. He basically had whores that would just follow him around because he made a lot of money doing what he did. And he just lived a really rough life. But he was loved by one man that was like just a one guy you would want to be loved by. Like Wyatt Earp, like a man of principle, you know? And I guess maybe it's a weird connection, but when I think of Jesus, I guess I just think of those publicans and those sinners as like that kind of a reject, like that Doc Holliday. And he's just the one guy that would sit around a campfire with him and say, I don't know, they just make me laugh. Like, he just had something in his soul that connected to them. And so, and when I started seeing Jesus like that, he kind of takes on a Wyatt Earp, like, shadow to me, where it's like, there's scriptural evidence that Jesus got hard a few times. Like, he got up in people's faces and was not afraid of a fight. And if you really think about what he went through, like the beatings and all that before the cross, like, he probably arguably could take a beating. Like, I'm not sure you could really take something like that without maybe having been in some scraps in your life. It's the things that they're not written about Jesus that give us such a void of who he really was.
Right.
And I just start to think that he was... that the reason people loved him is because he was just authentic. He didn't need to be anything for anybody. He was everything to anybody that let him be. Like that conversation he has with Mary when he's coming back into town after Lazarus is dead. The Bible video that they just did of it not too long ago, it's amazing because the passage goes, Jesus, comes into town, Mary runs to him and she says, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died, but even now I know that, whatever thou would ask of God, God will give it to thee. And he's like, thy brother will rise again. She's like, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection. And he's like, I'm the resurrection and the life. And if you read it, it just comes off as like, okay. But the way they perform it, like, she's sitting on the side of the road when Jesus comes back into town, and he like crouches down next to her, and she says, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. And he says, thy brother shall rise again. And she says, with like devoted disciple awareness, but such a mournful roll of the eyes, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection. I get that. Like, it doesn't solve her current problem, but she has a testimony that someday he'll be back. So when Jesus says to her, no, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me will never die. It gives like a whole different light to what he was saying to her. Like, he was saying, I have the power to do this. Like, we're not talking about some future day. We're talking about this can happen. And then, Martha joins him, and just that moment where Jesus is standing at the tomb and he pauses to say a prayer. And he says, Father, I thank thee that thou hast, what does he say? That thou hast, something about
I'm
basically
really impressed at your memory right
giving,
now. I'm not pulling this all up,
like,
all the scriptures.
basically he's just like, thank you for this moment. And then he says, Lazarus, come forth, and the rest happens. Like, it's that concept of Jesus turning into something other than an overly smiley, gentle, sweet, comfortable Savior. Like, I think something in me, maybe just through a lot of pain that I've been through, is just over that image. He doesn't help me. It doesn't help me that there's a really warm, fuzzy blanket out there called Jesus, and all I gotta do is wrap myself with it, and I'll feel great. Like, that doesn't. So I have to push the image of him harder in my mind to get a version of him that I can follow. That is my king. Is somebody that I would ride with to murder all the cowboys because this ends now. Almost like the Captain Moroni. How many people like.
You need someone that you can rally behind.
Yeah. And I'm inventing a version of him in my head like that, and I try to, study scriptures and stuff to add to that, but I could be wrong. Give it 20 years or so with more life experience and maybe just more wins. Maybe, like, right now, I've just had a lot of, like, defeats. I've had a lot of things not go the way I wanted them to go, so maybe with a few wins under my belt, maybe with me thinking I have control or that things can actually go the way I want them to go. I don't know. Maybe he'll soften in my mind. But right now, I just need. I need a hero. I can't think of the lyrics to that song. Dang it! It's
Holding out for a hero.
He's got to be good. He's got to be fast. He's got to be fresh with the fight. I don't know. Anyway. The whole point of this is what's fun about it, because, like, as a podcast, it gets organic and we can, like, just have a good conversation. But as a documentary, there's a specific reason why I wanted to talk to you. Like, you have a life experience that we want to talk about. So we're just going to hard shift into that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm with you.
So you went on a mission at a time when that was valued in the church, but not necessarily encouraged, I think. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I actually got a lot of kickback for it.
Why?
Well, that I was dating Rick before. Do you remember this?
I don't think I do.
Okay.
You
so
probably told me. And
you were in my first area, right? I was
Yes.
a brand new missionary.
Yeah.
And I had dated Rick for a little while, and anyway, we have this really long backstory. It took us like 5 years from point of meeting till when we got married. So let me pick it up when I got home from China.
Okay.
It was December, and my 21st birthday was in February, and my whole life I'd been preparing for a mission and knowing, like, that's what I wanted to do. I grew up in Nebraska, and there weren't very many members of the church there, and so I had lots of opportunities to discuss my beliefs, and my parents, specifically my dad, loved his mission, and they worked a lot with a number of different people throughout my teenage years in helping them reactivate in the church or join the church, and we had missionaries over at our house a lot, so it was very much a part of our family culture.
Yeah.
And it was just something I always expected to do. So by the time I got back home from China and I started preparing my papers, Rick and I had started dating a little bit at that point, and things were starting to get serious, and I don't know how much of this story to tell because it's definitely a story for another time. But
all of it.
All of it? Okay, so I was dating another guy when I was in China, and when I got back home...
I mean, I don't want to be ethnicist or racist, but was it a... Chinaman's the wrong word. Was it somebody
No, it was somebody I was in China with. An American.
Oh, okay.
It was a group of... I'm sorry, I didn't clarify that.
No, I can't even with myself. Good.
So when I got back, I was still kind of dating him, and then I had been writing Rick, and he was home from his mission, and we were just kind of friends, but kind of interested. And as I was getting ready to put in my mission papers, this was February by that point, I was still more serious with this other guy from China, and my bishop said, "Now you're still dating that guy, right? Well, you're putting in your papers, and that needs to end." So that night, I dutifully called him, and we went out, and I broke up with him and said, "I'm sorry, I'm preparing for a mission. My bishop says that no serious dating." And so he knew that I was planning on putting in my papers as soon as we got home anyway. So it wasn't a big shock. But Rick and I weren't officially dating at that point. And so this was, my birthday is February 17th, so it was like right around that time I put in my papers.
I don't remember how to do it. I'm the 18th.
Oh.
I feel like there was...
Kindred spirits.
On the mission, yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Anyway, so when I handed in my papers to my bishop, this was back in the day when they had
actual papers, yeah, I can't.
He said, President, or I guess Elder Monson at that point. No, he would have been in the presidency.
Yeah, he was the president.
He's like, President Monson's in our stake. I'm going to go take these to him tonight. You're calling on Wednesday. And so Wednesday came and went, and I didn't have my mission call, and I ended up waiting like 5 weeks. Was it 5? It was 5 weeks. It was the weekend before General Conference that my call finally came. So meanwhile, all that time, I'm waiting for a mission call. I'm still kind of dating Rick, and things started getting more and more serious. And so by the time my mission call came, he had already planned out to go to Philadelphia for the summer to sell house systems, alarm systems. And I opened up my mission call, and I was expecting this, like old Call to Serve video.
Yeah.
Where everybody's like, I was expecting that moment, and I read the Pennsylvania-Pittsburgh mission, and everyone in the room, all of my family, Rick's sitting right next to me, and they've got like phones going and everything. Everybody's like, it's a sign! You're not supposed to go to mission, you're supposed to get married! And it was like, oh, okay. Oh. So, my dad called the stake president, and the stake president's like, well, kind of sounds like maybe the Lord's telling her she doesn't need to be going on a mission. And he's like, why don't you tell her to think about it and pray about it and get back to me, and if that's if she still feels right about it, then we'll have her call changed. And so that weekend, Rick and I had planned we went up to Logan to watch conference with his grandma. And on the drive up there, we're talking about like pros and cons. And like all of a sudden, this world opened up to me where it was like, okay, maybe I'm not supposed to go on a mission. Maybe I am supposed to stay home. And because I had Rick and I was dating and everybody was like, it's a viable option. You know, you don't really need to get married. Why would you go on a mission? If you don't need to go on a mission, you've got an alternative. You know, it was more like a mission as a backup plan for... Yeah. Anyway, that's kind of the impression that I got. So we're talking pros and cons and as I'm talking pros and cons, I'm like, hush. I'm like, how do you weigh the cost of a soul? Like, I'm planning to go on a mission to help bring people closer to Christ, and how do you weigh that? I mean, where does that line up on a pros and cons list? Yeah. And on the other hand, getting married, like, I really like this guy, and I would like to marry him. And so, anyway, I just had a really hard time trying to figure that out, and we finally, I finally decided, okay, you know, the scriptures teach you make your decision, the Doctrine and Covenants, you make your decision, and then the Spirit will tell you what you're supposed to do. And I studied out all my options, and I knew what I wanted. I wanted to stay home. By that point, I didn't want to go on a mission, and so...
Wow.
I remember Rick and I were at a park, and we were just swinging and talking about it, and he said, so, do you want to? And I said, yeah. He went, really? I said, yeah. And he picked me up and he swung me around. And again, I expected like butterflies and music and I don't know. And I just kind of had this little pit in my stomach, like, am I making the right choice? And we drove down to Provo and we told his grandparents so that we could talk to them about living in their basement. And they were so excited. They loved his grandparents. Daisy, go lay down. And then we drove up to... I think we went to his parents and told them. And then we went up to my parents' house, and my parents were like, oh, that's great. Good for you. Is this really what you want? I'm like, yeah, that's really what I want. And then Rick went home, and as soon as he left, my dad's like, is this really what you want? And I'm like, yeah, it is what I want. He's like, what's that feeling in your stomach right now then? And I was like, oh, I know. So I called Rick, and
he said, just kidding.
Yeah, pretty much. He's still driving home at this point. And I was like, I need to think about this some more. Can you take the dog out of here, please, Stratton?
Daisy, come here. Your doggy.
It's like, no, I like it in here.
So he was really good about it, though. I said, I need to think about it some more. Mm-hmm. And he said, okay, well, I'll talk to you again. I think it was like on Wednesday or something. And this was a Sunday. And he said, I'm just going to give you some space. You can think about it. And I told him that I was going to fast about it the next day. And it must have been Tuesday he was going to talk to me. I can't remember the days. Anyway, so long story short, I fasted and I went to the temple. And that was killer to me. I went to the Salt Lake Temple. And I was sitting there in the celestial room thinking and praying. And there's all these brides coming in with their big, beautiful rings and their gorgeous dresses and the stars in their eyes. And I knew it wasn't for me yet. And I sobbed, like totally ugly cried in the temple. I'm sure people are like, ooh, sister, you doing okay? It was really, really, really hard. But I got home and I told my parents, and my parents had fasted with me as well. And I called Rick and said, sorry, I need to go on a mission. He's like, I know. I was like, what? He said, I fasted for you too, and my mom did. And I support you. And so the way that we left it was, I said, I want you to date while I'm gone. I don't want you to just be sitting at home. And if it's supposed to work out when I get home, then it'll work out. And he's like, no, I don't want to date. Like,
I love this guy. That's amazing. It's like, I mean, thanks for the advice, but no, I'm good. I already met perfection. I'll just sit here till she's ready.
So, and he did end up dating.
Because your dad told me to.
This is nice because you get to hear my version of the story. Rick's version is just a little bit different. Yeah, I guess.
I love the pressure there, where it's just like your dad told him
Yeah,
to.
my dad was giving him pointers while he was
You don't
gone.
remember this? Your dad's like, it's too easy. You need to play hard to get. You need to date. And you need to write in letters and tell her you're dating.
My dad was a salesman.
Oh.
Anyway, so when I first got out on my mission, which is when you knew me, I
Yeah.
was like, I'm gonna do this, I've got this, I can do it.
Yeah.
And I didn't tell anybody about Rick because I didn't want all the kickback and like, why are you here? You shouldn't be here. Go home and get married. Because it was all I could do to have gotten myself to the point where I was there and committed to it, you know. So, back up. So,
Yeah.
after I told him no,
Yeah.
my dad called the stake president, and I had said, you know, Heavenly Father knew my situation with Rick. He knew where Rick was going to be, and for some reason, I was still given that mission call. So
Yeah.
there must have been a reason that I was called to that mission. So don't bother getting it changed. That's where God wants me. So, and that's why I ended up knowing you. But yeah, so that was April, and then I didn't leave till July. So it was this really long, drawn out. I went into the MTC the day before his birthday. So anyway,
Meeting you like hurt my heart because I'm the middle of 5 kids. I have an older sister, older brother, younger sister, younger brother. And arguably I was raised by my older sister. I mean, my brother was there as probably my primary male influence, but me and my sister spent a lot of time there, listen to music, watch movies and stuff. I could still probably list off all the crazy, like, Bed of Roses and just, like, hyper chick flick stuff that we would watch, and it just became a part of me to the point that, like, my best friends are women, and I think that's mostly just because women are more vulnerable. They're more willing to go to the emotional places that I would rather go, and men, for the most part, are. So, mission life, like, was me spending so much time just being a guy, because you're just around a guy, and you just want to, like, fit in and not be weird. And then you show up and are just glowing with vulnerability. Like, you are just, your heart is on your sleeve, and you're just at all times trying to, like, connect with people and trying to, you know, bring people closer to joy and closer to Christ and stuff. And I'm just, I mean, we got to spend so little time together just because, like, it's own stuff, we would see each other and what have you. But, like, it just, I think maybe it was just the first time that it reminded me that, like, just soft, delightful, funny women exist, and it just made me, like, miss my, you know, the life where, like, women were in it. So, you know, yeah, it was, it kind of sucked to have to go back into, I think when I met you, I think I was with Lanier, who's a sweet kid, but just weird, a really strange duck. So, you know, I meet someone that I could talk to, even though, because of mission rules, there's not that far we can really go, because keep your distance.
right.
But then I just gotta go home with this, like, weird kid. But on top of that, you were with Farnes, who I, like, immediately had a crush on. Like, first time I saw her, I was just like, yeah, that, forever. That's amazing. To the point that I'm silly enough, when I got home, like maybe the day I got home, I tracked down her number and called her. And we chatted for like a minute, but she was up, I think she was up at BYU, Idaho at the time or something, and circumstantially it just wasn't going to happen, but I was like...
She totally loved you as a little brother. Like, I'm just putting that out there.
Which is my life.
She just thought you were great.
My
she
life
had
is
so
that,
much
you know...
fun anytime you were around. She's like, oh, he's the best.
Probably because I was just like a chihuahua, just nipping at her heels anywhere she'd go. I'd be like, I want to be over there.
Be around.
I am. That's fair and fun. Thank you for saying that, though. But there was a lot more there with her. So it was kind of one of those weird things where, like, I mean, you are super cute too, and there it was basically the combination of the two of you that I was just like, it was a 1-2 punch of like sisters and the types of humans I would prefer to. It was just.
She's a very.
It became hard.
Person
It's like this sucks, but it was fun, but it was also just weird and. And I don't know. I guess there was also the element. You probably didn't pay attention to it because you came out on a mission to serve and to teach. But the element of just elders that were also like interested in you and were like, vying for your attention and different things like that. You probably, I'm seeing it in your eyes right now. You didn't notice it at all. But me sort of then, like, I love these two women already and would love to connect with them, but immediately just push back in line because there's like these alpha dudes that are just like swarming in.
The funniest thing about going to the reunions for me has been is like the first couple we'd go to. Obviously, I brought Rick with me, and so they knew I was married. But these guys would come up to me like, "Sister Stratton, how are you? So good to see you." And I'm like, "Hi, I know your name." And that's just the dynamics when you have 20 women and 130 some odd, I don't even know, men. Like everybody knows who the sisters are because there's higher profile, I guess. So for me, it was just like the elders that I served with that I knew and just loved and adored. And the other ones, I was like, "Hi, I recognize you." Like the elders you're telling me about, I'm like, "Yeah, I think I know who that is," but.
And I hurt for them. I hurt for them in those situations where all they want is to know that you cared that they existed. And you're just like, "What's your name again?" They're like, "Doesn't matter. I'm just going to go call the day right now because I didn't make an impact on Saturday Stratton. It's over. I don't care.
Sure.
I'm out."
Sure, that's what it is.
So, Farms was your first companion, and that was... It was in the Cranberry Zone, but I'm not sure I know what area
Baden.
you guys were in. Baden? Okay. How was that experience? Both with farms and in the area.
So night and day different, because here I was coming from Utah.
Yeah.
Dry climate. And when I first got out, it was end of July.
Oh.
So it was like muggy and it was all I could do to not hate everything for like the first 3 months. And then fall hit and I was in love. Just like all the trees, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
But it took a minute to get situated to like, this is my life and this is who I am.
How long were you there in that area?
3 months. So the first 6 weeks was with just Farms, and then Sister Hatch came in too. So we had a threesome, which I discovered is incredibly awkward.
Why awkward?
We're here on your doorstep, and we're going to force you to join our. I don't know, it's just a really weird...
The proselyting side of it is, yeah. But I imagine, like, the living situation was probably better. I liked being in situations where there was just more than me and my companion. Unless it was, like, Elder Hancock or something that was just endlessly awesome. Did you ever know Dan Hancock?
No.
The dude? Did you ever hear stories? Nothing? Endlessly amazing. Anyway, so you were there in the threesome, and then...
Then I got transferred up to Jamestown. Well... It was the Faulkner zone, or Jamestown zone, and it was Faulkner was my area, the Sister Pittman.
And that, I think I knew her. Yeah, I must have.
She was in Pittsburgh she was in Pittsburgh a couple of times.
Maybe I'd seen her, but I heard more about her than I had actually been around her or seen her. Just that all the elders were like, "Oh yeah, Pittman rocks. She's great."
She was a solid missionary.
So Jamestown. At what point did you cross paths with Golightly? Was that up there?
Mm-hmm. I was up there for like, I don't know, 6 months, I think.
Oh, that's a big chunk.
Yeah, for a sister's mission.
Sister, yeah.
And it was hard because it was like 4 hours. No. It was the top of the mission, so it was a long ways away.
It was like 5 to 6 hours, probably. It was forever.
Yeah. Ugh. So that was you know,
And it's
to
like,
go from being really close to
you're
the
like deep in the
being-
winter at that point, so it's just like
Yeah,
the
all
Lake
the lake
Erie
effect
and
snow.
cold and
Yeah.
gross. I was just talking to Jake about that. Like, I have a memory of one time. I think it's probably because I was serving in Kane at the time, so I was just like way up north. We got somehow up to Lake Erie, and I was just like, "You named this lake well. Like, it's creepy. Like, it's just a dark, dreary,
Uh-huh.
windy, like just bleh,
Yeah.
gross place." I think there was even a smell. I was like, "What's that? Like, there's something in the water. I don't like this. This is no good." But that was all the Lake Erie got. So 6 months of Jamestown. Who were you with Pittman and anybody else?
And then Sister Christensen.
Also heard of, but I don't
Yeah,
think I was around her.
She was wonderful too. I loved her. And then I got transferred down to. Oh, see, now I can't remember it.
It's gonna come. It's gonna come all the way back.
It was outside of Pittsburgh,
Which end? North, south, east, west?
southwest. It wasn't St. Clairsville. St.
There
Clairsville
was
was the last.
Upper St. Clair?
one.
There was Beachview, which is
It
where
wasn't
I
in
was.
Pittsburgh.
There
It was like half an hour outside of Pittsburgh.
Yeah. There was like Brookline. There was yeah. You get farther down, I get a little fuzzy, but there's like some just kind of weird suburban towns down
Yeah.
there. I can't think of where because it feels like it got sketchier the farther south you got in Pittsburgh, and so there's some places they just wouldn't put sisters because it was like you're never gonna be able to leave your apartment, like it's just not safe. So
Yeah, I never actually served in Pittsburgh,
yeah, me neither.
but a year after my mission was over, Rick and I got married, and I don't know when it would have been. It was the following summer. Yeah, the year after we got married. We went back
Uh-huh.
and we went in Pittsburgh and like toured around in Pittsburgh. I was
Yeah.
like, this is kind of a scary city. Like, I'm just a little white girl here, and I don't know this lingo here. I kind of regret that I never got to serve in Pittsburgh because I didn't get to feel the beat of the city and like experience the city life, you know? So I tell people
like you're Billy Joel down there, just like
yeah, exactly.
what in the world?
But when I tell people I went to the Pittsburgh mission, they're like, "Oh, Pittsburgh," and I'm like, "Yeah, I went there a couple times for zone conferences. Like, I really don't know what the city's like, you know."
Right?
So
Just getting on the trolley on a game day just to like see just
yeah, see,
yellow and black
you guys
all the
have
way
these
down.
Stories, and I don't have those experiences.
Well, that was Beachview. Like we were in the ghetto south of Pittsburgh, and it just so happened that like we could take the trolley, and the trolley went into town. Like I think me and Coombs went up in there and got like a hot chocolate once. It must have been during like the holidays because they had the big Christmas tree set up in the ice skating rink, and so people were skating around. So we watched that for a minute and then just turned around because it wasn't our area. Like we weren't like allowed to be there, but the trolley took us there, so whatever. But yeah, I didn't get that. I feel like I was in Pittsburgh at one point for some weird reason. Probably like over halfway through my mission, and these members from my second area, the guy, I don't know if did you ever, what was the name of that family? The Gilmores? They were in North Hills was the area they were in, but basically the dude was a Paul McCartney impersonator. I don't know if that ever...
no.
Okay.
See, I don't know all these people either that everybody...
Epic family, great family. Anywho, he connected with me musically, and he rewrote Yesterday as like an anthem for missionaries. It's great. I had a recording of it, gone forever. So sad.
Oh.
Anyway, there was him, and there was another dude in that same area named... I feel like he had like a female name, but I don't know, Gale, but he was a guy. I can't really remember his name. But he had like a big old beard and long hair and stuff, and he lived in this like just jank old house, like this 3-story house that's been in his family for like 18 generations, and it's falling apart, but whatever, it's his. And he was like a guitar player. He played like this sick like 1958 Gibson SG thing through these like antique amps and stuff. And me and Frank Sanders, who was also kind of a music file, went down there, and we'd hang out with him, and he'd let me play the guitar and stuff like that. But anyway, those two, like, Brother Gilmore and Brother whatever his name is were in the city and just happened to be driving by like where I was, and they like rolled down the window like, "Play lock," and I'm like, "Hi!"
Fun.
And like I think Brother Gilmore said, "We miss you, man. You got to come back to the North Hills." And I'm just like, "Oh, the missionaries there are good. You guys are in good hands." And he's like, "No one like you, though." And I was just like,
Aww.
"Don't do it. Don't make me feel good about me." And then I just drove off his traffic and stuff. But that was, I think that was one of the only times I was ever even in the city. It's so funny being called to like the Pittsburgh mission, and you spend all your time in crazy places you've never heard of, because that's the mission. And now I guess I heard a while ago that they like shut down the Harrisburg mission and like split it between Philly and Pittsburgh. So
you know what's
now
crazy?
apparently,
My youngest sister is on a mission right now in Baltimore. Why are you laughing?
combination of things. Just another Stratton in the field. That's what this world needs. Good gravy.
She's very different from me. She's an introvert.
Really?
Yeah. Anyway, she is like, she's in Pennsylvania right now though. Yeah, and she's probably like half an hour, 45 minutes away from one of my areas.
What?
Yeah.
Being in the Maryland mission?
Baltimore, Maryland.
I'm gonna have to see the map of that mission. How do you?
It just cuts up into Pennsylvania just a little ways.
Wow. Bananas. So we left you in an area that we couldn't figure out the name of, the one that's just southwest of the city. How long were you there? Do you remember? Or who you were with?
4.5 months. I had a few different companions there. Whiteley and I can picture her face in our Facebook friends, and I can't think of her right now. And then I ended with
Was it Meisel?
Oh,
Was it
Sister
Bellards?
Meisel was there too. Yeah,
She was there
I had
also?
like 4 different companions there. I had her at one point, which was really weird because we flew out together. We were in the MTC at the same time, but in different districts, and then we flew out together, and then we served together for 6 weeks. Like after we had served most of our missions, and we'd become like these new people.
Yeah.
And then we ended up flying home together, which was, I don't know, it was just kind of a fun way to wrap up my mission with somebody that I had gone out with.
Yeah.
And Sister Openui was the last one I had there, and then I think some of those ones I listed, they were in St. Clairsville. Then I went to St. Clairsville for the rest of my mission, which was in Ohio. So I served 6 months of my mission in New York, and another like 6 months in Ohio. So most of my mission I really didn't even serve in Pennsylvania itself. So how's that for you?
That's amazing. I feel like I went with either like a zone leader or an assistant or something like that, or I don't know, on a special assignment or something to like Steubenville once. It was the only time I ever like crossed the border that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, this is what it looks like Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
it's not different. So I didn't really get a taste of like where the West Virginia
was, right. When we were in St. Clairsville, we had to cut across Pennsylvania to go to church in West Virginia every Sunday. It was the weirdest thing. Like, I don't know, you get used to being out here in all these really big states and you drive for hours and hours, but there I was on the little cusp of 3 different states. So.
I mean, considering West Virginia has a sort of a reputation for being very specific, like, and obviously you were in a Pennsylvania mission, so you got used to the UNS guys and all that nonsense. Like, did you get a taste of West Virginia? Like, were the people different there?
There were a lot of jokes in St. Clairsville. They'd tell us about what West Virginians are like, and I learned that that's the only state where it's legal to eat your roadkill and like weird things. And
which P.S.
I don't actually know if that's true. I should say that as a caveat.
I think it was Losser that told me that you and Barnes. I'm gonna let you tell it. I love how you know exactly what I'm talking about, and I'm just like, what? As he's telling me this story, it doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so from what I recall,
Stop it. You remember this vividly.
So I feel like missionaries should have fun as well. We were driving on the way to, Sister Barnes and I were driving on the way to an appointment, and it was somebody that the elders had given us because we had to drive like right by their house.
Yeah.
Which was, I don't know, it was kind of a rundown. They lived down in the basement, and there was this big property.
It was like overgrown grass, if I remember right. Like it was, it was weird.
Yeah. And they
It was
had
like
this barn that was falling down.
It was like a Lovely Bones house, like a place you'd bring somebody if you just didn't want them to even find the body. Like it was a weird place.
It was. Anyway, so that plays in a little bit later. It's a little bit creepy and sketchy. So anyway, we're driving up this long road that they lived on, and there's some roadkill, this dead possum, and I was like, "Oh, Sister Barnes, we have to go take that possum and put it on the elders' front porch."
Oh, it was your idea.
She's like, okay, on the way back from the appointment. So we went and did our appointment on the way back. We went and got the roadkill. And I don't even remember what we, like, put it in. But let me just tell you, a dead possum is really rank. Like, really, really smelly. We're like, gagging as we're taking it. So we went and we put it on the elder's porch. And I want to say we got into their house and we got some ketchup and like squirted it on just to, you know, like make it a little bit more legit. And we didn't hear anything for, I don't think it was that night. Either that or they called us and we're like, no. Anyway, the story of what happened didn't come out till later. And they didn't know it was us at first. And they had some really creepy appointment, and this guy got super mad at them and like threatened them somehow, and then they come home and they have this roadkill on their porch. And Elder Losser, when he found out it was us, he was so mad. He was like, "Dude, I slept with a knife under my pillow for a week." Because he thought that we were the creepy guy that threatened to kill him.
I officially can't wait for you to hear Elder Losser's side of this story.
Why?
Because
is it a totally different story? That's what I remember.
it's the same story, but in his version, they knew it was you the minute that they saw it.
No, they did
and
not!
Lost decided he was going to own you by creating this whole story about this thing. And he said, the way he said it was, he was just like, they were telling you guys this story, like maybe a week later, like some time had passed, about all this creepy stalker guy and all this stuff. And they were like, your eyes were just getting all big. And like, I think you went and told Cameron, who just wouldn't have known anything was going on. You're just like, this happened, and we're so sorry we did it. And Lawson was just like, owned him. Like, they can't have me.
Oh, okay, good. I feel better that he wasn't really freaked out.
He would say something like that, though. Like, you made me sleep with a knife in a pillow. That South Salt Lake gangster in him endears me to him. I love that, like, that kid, you know, he's just kind of arguably a little guy, and yet, like, I feel like he could beat up, like, Jason Momoa. You know what I mean? I don't know why. I just think, like, he'd still be standing up to that. He's a good kid. So you were done in
St. Clairsville.
St. Clairsville. I mean, in talking with other people that I've been talking to, we've gotten into like specific mission stories and just sort of the drama, because part of, I guess, the purpose of this documentary is to try to bring like humanity to being a missionary, because I think a lot of people get caught up in the image. You see two well-dressed sister missionaries, or, you know, the two guys with the shirt and ties, and they're smiling and they're happy about everything, and you get this impression or opinion of them that you're just like, oh, that's not real, that's lame. Like, it's hard to really buy that anything could be that perfect, but the truth is, behind closed doors, like, missionaries, like, do and say awful things to each other, and are just, they're kids. They're kids. And they display all of the flaws and imperfections of kids. And so, to some degree, I'm always curious. I'm curious with these different conversations, like what situations, like there's funny stories like the roadkill, but there's also dark and hard stories. Like for me, talking about Meadville, or talking about Beachview with Elder Coombs. I don't know if you ever met Elder Coombs, Kent Coombs, but he was...
Again, I never served with him, so
like
the name sounds familiar, but I can't...
A chemically imbalanced human being that, like, severely abused all of his companions, like, verbally and physically as much as he could get away with it, like... And, me and Gladly talked about that because he served around him and knew him while I was with him. But point being, we've got a pretty decent overview of at least where your mission happened. And I know some things about some of your companions, and I've heard stories and stuff like that. But, I mean, you went out for a passionate and devoted reason. But I don't think a mission ever goes the way you think it's going to. Right? Like, it just... So I'm curious, from your perspective, from maybe what you were expecting to what happened, or, I don't know, maybe if you're willing, even some of your own flaws, just things that you saw that were hurting other people or holding you back, and just what you did about that once you saw it or noticed it. Does your mission register with you in that way? Like, do you think about it in those terms?
I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're getting at, but I think a mission highlights your flaws in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And also presents you with a lot of opportunities to come to terms with those flaws.
Yes.
Especially where you're with a companion 24/7,
Yeah.
and not all relationships are ideal. And not all of them, like, I'm trying to be tactful here.
You really are.
Some companionships were really brutally hard for me.
Yeah.
But because my goal was to teach other people and bring them to Christ, like, that had to take a back seat, and which is hard because it's constantly slamming you in the face, right?
Yeah.
You never get away from that person and
Yeah.
the things that just make you crazy about them.
Yeah.
But I think I cared a lot about presenting myself in a way that reflected positively on the church and on my family and on the Savior. And so while we've talked about I'm very upfront and honest person, I have a really hard time not expressing my true feelings. It was a learning experience for me to put aside my personal feelings about some of the companions and focus more on the work and focus on the positive things of our relationship and try to make it work anyway.
Yeah.
In fact, I had one of my companions, I had such a hard time, and I just felt so worthless a lot of the times because I wasn't measuring up. And I'm already really hard on myself, so to have her be hard on me as well was even worse in a lot of ways. And so, but when we were around members, and when I was talking with the companion herself, and or around people that were investigating the church, I didn't want to be like, roll my eyes, you're such a jerk. I didn't want, that's not what, it wasn't about me and about my relationship with her. It was about those people. And so it was a new experience for me to push that aside and focus on something different. And I really felt successful when she was transferred away, and we were with, we had my new companion, took her to a member's house and introduced her, and the wife was like, oh, aren't you just crushed? Aren't you going to miss Sister So-and-so? And I was like, no, I think I'll be okay. I learned a lot from her. And she's like, I thought you were best friends. And I'm like, no, not really. It's kind of hard for me. She's like, no way. I had no idea, And so, anyway, I didn't feel like, haha, I deceived her. I felt like, good. The rough spots in our relationship weren't what came across to her, and that was my goal. So.
Damn it, Sarity. So.
So take that one, Adam? Or are you gonna go with that?
I actually do love that you're everything that I think you are. Like that you, I mean, had you, displayed something else, I would have enjoyed the nuance of you. I'm not saying you're not a nuanced person, but what you just described is rare. Very, very rare in this
How
world. I think a lot of people have great intentions, and I think a lot of people really want things to work out, and then I think their fuses just get short, and I think they fail, and I think they blow up at people when they start arguments that are unnecessary, and before you know it, you're both slamming doors and like not seeing each other for hours.
That's not to say that I
like,
didn't have any, I had some of those, and Sister Maisel will tell you, by the time I was with her, I was kind of unreal out of the times, and we butted heads, and so I can be pretty honest with that, and I'm sure she would just laugh at it and agree and roll her eyes at me, but for the most part, I don't feel like displaying all that for everybody else to see is helpful to anyone, especially given my purpose.
as a missionary, though.
Right, for sure.
But psychologically, like right now, since the mission's over, and
right.
Clearly, I think we all still have a discipleship that we like to tend to. There may be psychological benefit to this, especially considering the fact that, to some degree, I'm making this film for potential missionaries. Because what I would like to try to do, when I was getting ready to go on a mission, I would watch God's Army or
whatever it was we had in those days.
Labor of Love. There was this really good
Yes,
a returning missionary and I would just get it in my head that that's what a missionary is. And then I went out and discovered that
you're two real people and you have two totally different personalities. And you have to somehow make those work and accomplish goals.
Days don't get shorter just because you're busy. If you're walking 14 miles, you're walking 14 miles next to a person that maybe you had an argument with over breakfast, and so you're just both being awkwardly quiet for a 3-hour walk to wherever you're going. It's sometimes the worst parts of marriage in a relationship that you didn't pick. It's the one place where you can feel compassion for arranged marriages, where people just get put together and you can't do anything about what's happening. You're devoted to the cause, and the cause functions like this. So I want to try again to access the humanity of what's hard about being a missionary. With Losser, we talked a lot about. Losser had, for a lot of his early life, a lot of access to and essentially an addiction to porn. And that didn't just go away when he became a missionary. He had to deal with that. And toward the end of his mission, I didn't know this. And it kind of bums me out that I didn't know it, because maybe I could have helped, but he didn't give me that access. He had a friend back home that was sending him porn. Not because he asked him to, just because it was that level of a friend. He was just that kind of a guy. So, on top of him dealing with it, now he's got access for reasons that he didn't ask for, and now he's just getting sort of sucked deeper into a hole that he would like to be free of. So my point is, we take with us into the mission field all of the flaws that we had in our old life. And maybe for the first 3 months or so, you're riding so high on the Spirit from the MTC, or just your own expectations of you, you're pushing yourself so hard that it feels like all those things are gone. Because you're just not feeling some of those same pulls to those things or whatever. And I think it was like that for me. I think for probably maybe the first, arguably, 6 months of my mission, I felt cured. And then before I know it, just little habits and stuff were coming back, and it made me think from the sense that I went through arguably the most church discipline you can go through before I came out of my mission. It was about 2 years of going through a process. So having finally got out in the field and doing it, and then finding myself struggling with some of those same things, I had to kind of ask myself, are you doing the right thing? Should you be here? Do you deserve to be here? Should you just go home and just I don't know, start living life because this isn't for you. Because in my head, although I've been living mission life for 6 months, I think I was still trying to be the missionaries in the movies. I think I wasn't connecting to the fact that God, our Heavenly Father, when I submitted my application to be a missionary, He honored the calling of an apostle. And when my picture popped up in my little bio on that computer screen that they used to do that stuff, that there was a moment that my foreordination, whatever it is, was set into place because of who I am. That with all my faults, I got sent to Pittsburgh. And if I could just be patient with myself and the times where I'm not living my best self, that there would be moments that I would be blessed to be perfect in Christ. There would be moments that He would be there with me, and I'd get to,
And it transcends who you are in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think as a missionary, what happens is, if you find it, I think maybe not all missionaries find it, you can get to a point where you realize that, sin and repentance isn't what you thought it was. It's not, man, I really need to feel guilty about this, and then I need to ask Him to forgive me, and then I need to never do it again. The Bible dictionary definition of repentance doesn't actually even say any of those things. It says it's a translation of a Greek word that just means to change your perspective of who and what God is. So to repent is literally to say, okay, I'm doing things that don't make me feel great. And my current perspective of God leads me to believe that He also doesn't feel great about this. However, He sent His Son to suffer unimaginably to give me space to make these mistakes. So if that's the case, how much does He really care on an individual basis about the mistakes that I'm making? Or is there something bigger going on here? And that's the moment when you start to see that God's not checking lists. God is looking at you, and He's watching you grow like a plant. He's watching you grow. He's watching you become something, and all He's focused on is what you're being and what you are becoming. And that's it. And I feel like I'm not sure that I got to that spot on my mission. I think I served my mission feeling very poorly about myself because I was carrying around things. I mean, I would do the right thing and talk to, President Cameron about it and get counsel, but, I just still felt lousy. And I guess maybe that's what I'm trying to understand from other people's perspective, especially you, somebody that I deem to be flawless in the sense that, again, what you present, what you work so hard to present is arguably and measurably flawless. I'm interested in, why are you hard on yourself? What about you is so, in your opinion, deplorable that you feel the need to be hard on yourself?
Can I tell you one of the hardest things I earned on my mission? I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and I kind of set a pattern in my family of excellence, and I wasn't a straight A student. I was pretty close, but I was active in a lot of things, sports and music and all that kind of stuff, and I went to seminary every day and earned all the seminary whatevers they were, and I did all of the things, and my parents would always tell me, "Oh, you're doing such a good job. I'm so proud of you." And that's like my love language. I've learned is the words of approval. Mm-hmm. And then so I always knew how I was doing, where I was at, and where I could do better. Mm-hmm. And then I went on my mission, and all of a sudden nobody was around that cared. President Cameron did, and he was wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. And I just sucked up every moment I was with him because I just felt such love radiating from him, and Sister Cameron as well. And I felt like I was doing the right thing and that I was where I was supposed to be. And but to not have my parents to go home to every night and like bounce stuff off of them and get ideas and hear their approval and, hey, good job on that. Yeah, that was a great idea. And, it was just a totally different thing for me. And so I think part of why I was hard on myself is because I was always expecting more from myself because I never had anybody saying, you're enough. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So it wasn't until I was in that area that I can't remember what it was called. And one elder that was my zone leader, and I can't remember his name. No, actually, it was Elder Baldwin, I want to say. And he's not a tender, lovey kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it when I was around elders like you that were like, hey, how are you? Like, honestly cared.
Yeah.
Or they'd be like, oh, sisters, you're doing such a great job. We're so proud of, this success that you've had. And he was not like that at all. He was very, very business. And I just wanted a relationship with people, like, the same as you. Like, you just get kind of lonely as a missionary because every 6 weeks, you can be transferred to places where nobody knows who you are. Nobody knows.
Dark blue. Have you ever been alone in a crowded room? That's being a missionary.
Yeah. And so the relationships that I had with my companion and with the elders were really important to me. And I was with a particularly challenging companion there, and she struggled with mental health as well. So we dealt with that a lot. And so the elders were kind of my lifeline. And here I have this zone leader that just didn't really care to connect a whole lot. And bless his heart, he was probably just trying to be exactly obedient, some elders are like, oh, stay away from the missionaries or from the sisters. They're dangerous, and I don't know, maybe he was like that, but maybe he just is not an interpersonal connector.
Yeah.
Anyway, I gave him my numbers one night. I called him as we were reporting in and gave him the numbers and told him I was really frustrated that something didn't go well and said something about how I had needed, he said, good job, sister, great numbers or something. And I said, yeah, well, I wish I was, I don't know. I complained in some way about my performance. And it was like he'd had enough of me. And he's like, Sister Stratton, you need to know that I can't always be telling you how good of a missionary you are. And I was like, oh, okay. And he went on, chastising me for, basically for, like, craving that.
That is the best backhanded compliment I've ever heard. He's like, yeah, I could sit here and just tell you you're great every day, but no.
I didn't think
no,
I
won't.
I was deeply offended. And at that point, I hadn't realized what I was doing. Like, I just thought that if I was a better missionary, then I would be bringing people to baptism, like, every week. And because I wasn't enough, then the missionary work wasn't enough in my area. And I had thought about it. I was like, if my potential is to be like God, and I'm supposed to be doing the best I can, so why am I not being as good as God is? I don't know, maybe that's hugely pretentious.
That is like the most powerful thing.
I thought that all the time. Every time I was like, just do the best you can. Well, my best is eventually going to be like a God, so why am I so careful? Or why am I so, holding myself back in so many ways? I know. I struggled so badly with that.
You're feeling a way about that that's not... I mean...
Are you telling me I'm not normal? People don't think this.
I think more people do think that way than either they've consciously become aware of or that they'll admit. Especially in Mormonism. When, yes, the entire doctrine of this church is that as man is, God once was, as God is, man may become. Like, we get it in our heads that we're going to get there someday, and so every day we're kind of just like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Because we have this perception of ourselves that we're just like, I don't know how it could be any better than this. Did you see how I crushed that day? Like, and obviously we're wrong, or we would be there. I mean, there's scriptural evidence of people being translated. Like, it happens. So if we're still here, It's probably because we're not right. And again, I think that's what repentance is. And if you reread the scriptures with that definition in mind, they're not saying, say you're sorry for the things you're doing wrong and stop doing them. They're saying, you're a child of God. You are of the house of Elohim. And you don't get it. You don't connect to that. And he wants you to. So change the way that you see him. You don't see him correctly. There's this beautiful book called The Shack, where this guy basically writes a fictional tale about this man who lost his young daughter. They just made it into a movie.
I had a friend that
the
told me
movie's
about that,
outstanding.
and she sobbed just telling me about that movie.
It's outstanding. You should take time and watch it. It's
well,
hard.
She cried
It's dark.
telling me about it, so I didn't want to go cry.
Well,
so I
as a
watched
parent, like I don't have that,
emotional.
but the story starts with a man losing his
a child.
3 or 4 year old daughter to essentially like a arguably like a child molesting, like rapist murderer kind of situation. So he didn't know how much she may have suffered before she died, and he just carried it with him for so long until at some point he gets a letter in the mail, essentially from God saying, "I'll be at the shack this weekend if you want to talk." And he goes angrily, and it's beautiful, like the way they actually portrayed the Trinity, like the Godhead, as 3 separate beings, and the way that each of them talk to him and how they work with him to help him understand it better and to help him find peace with it. It's beautiful, but my point in saying all of that comes down to most of what he goes through in that time with them is God trying to show him that he doesn't understand God. Like, when he's talking about, he'll say something like, well, why is there so much pain in the world? Why is there so much suffering? Why don't you come down and do something about it? And the character of, Heavenly Father, which is actually played by Olivia Spence in the movie, like it's in the book, it's an old black woman. She's basically just like, you know what your problem is, Mackenzie? You don't think I'm good. Because if you understood how good I am and how the power that I have to make things good and to heal things, none of what you're blaming me for and none of what you're throwing at me would hold the kind of weight that it does, because I'm good. And none of that has power over me. I'm in all of it. And I'm doing what I do. And it will all be beautiful. Why? Because I'm beautiful. It's a repentant perspective of God where if you can ground your faith in the fact that no matter how bad things look right now, that there is a God who is good and cares about everyone and everything involved in that thing, your worries can melt away because he's got it. And if you want, if you're willing, you can pick up a shovel and help him. And he'll let you, because he likes that. He really likes when people step up and help him. It's good. You should see it. You should read the book. There's a good audiobook performance about it. The movie's really good. Anyway, I think we did it. I think we accomplished this conversation. I don't know. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, just finishing with what I had to earn from that situation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because I was really offended, I just kind of slammed the phone down and went and cried and prayed, and I realized that I had been taking it all on myself, that I hadn't really been listening to God and allowing him to be the one to give me the approval. And that, I think that was a turning point in my mission. But that wasn't until I had been out for a year or more, and I really had to kind of have some soul-searching moments and learn to have a relationship for myself with God. And despite all of the seminary classes I'd been to and all the times where I had prayed and gotten answers, like somehow it still wasn't in me at that point, and I didn't really realize how much Heavenly Father really loved me, how much my Savior was there for me. And so I think as you go out on a mission, that's one of the things you don't realize. I mean, they say you're going to change while you're on your mission, and you'll come back a new person. But it's different for each individual. Like, what things you need to learn, what are your weaknesses, and what does the Lord need you to become specifically. You had a very different mission than I did, but we both had the experiences that we needed for whatever roles we continue to fill in our life. And I look back on my mission all the time, thinking about the things that I learned. And how many years has it been?
15.
Jeez. And well, I don't remember names and faces anymore. Almost every day, I would say, I have like a little flashback of like walking down a road or sitting in someone's house and like what the house looked like and my feelings in that moment. And so it's still a part of me, no matter where I go and what I do, and the life skills that I learned, being able to talk to anybody in any scenario, no matter the age difference or the socioeconomic class or intelligence level. Like, you talk to people that are brilliant, you talk to people that are drunk, you know, you learn how to relate with people on all sorts of levels, and it's just it's so weird to experience it, but the ways that it changes you, and you look, I don't know, I look back and I think, you know, I learned this specific thing on my mission, and I use this all the time. This is why Heavenly Father needed me to learn this skill, or gee, I really hated that companion. But the things that I learned from him or her were so valuable, because now I take that and I apply that with my children, or with my young women, or with my husband, and all these experiences that, you know, you get so wrapped up in this, I'm going to serve for 18 months or 2 years, and I'm just going to serve out my time and do the best that I can while I'm here. And you don't realize, like, the echoes of eternity that are happening just because of you being out there and putting in your heart and trying to become like Christ and share that with other people. I'm just really grateful that now you know my story about, you know, I came really close to not even serving a mission, and I'm really grateful that it all panned out the way that it did, because I had to earn that going on a mission, and if I hadn't, then I wouldn't have tried so hard as a missionary. And because I tried so hard as a missionary, I learned the value of hard work, and because I learned how to do that, then I came home and I had to apply that in college and with my relationship with my husband when we got married. And anyway, it's a beautiful thing, and it just leads me to think more and more. I'm so grateful that Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ know me well enough to know what I would need in order to do the next step in my life, and the next step, and, you know, all the way down to the end of my life. I'm sure there's repercussions from a mission that I haven't experienced yet, but I'm blessed. We're blessed.
Yes, we are. It means the world to me that you would take the time and even, I guess, trust me enough to do something like this. So thank you.
I'm excited to see where you take it.
And,
it'll be cool.
We'll see what story comes out of all this. Thanks again.
You bet.